Hey everybody, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I'm going to wrap up this transfer case project. I've got the old seals removed, I've got the surfaces prepped, and we're ready to put the new ones in. We're going to start with this one. These paper gaskets go in first, and then you put these types of seals in here. Now some are double-sided like this one is. It's got a flat area here and a flat area here. And some are open on the back, like these little ones are. See, this side is open and this side is closed and flat. These happen to be the double-sided seals. I think they're the better quality ones. It's easy to know which way to put these little seals in because the open side is the side that goes towards the oil and the flat side faces out. With these double-sided ones like this, you have to be a little bit more careful, but it's obvious to folks that have done this before. You can pretty much just look right at it and tell which way it goes. But for those of you who don't know, if you pull back the seal with your thumb just a little bit, you can see that spring in there. That is the side that goes towards the oil. So I think I'm ready to go here. Just make sure it's in the right orientation. Set it in there as level as I can to start with. No oil or grease or anything. These are, press fit in there. And you need to find some sort of a tool so you can tap these in uniformly rather than just use a hammer and go around in a circle. That's not the best way to do it. Now for these littler ones, remember they're open on the back, so that's the side that goes towards the oil. And I saw another guy do this. He packed the open area on the inside with grease. And the only real danger here is you don't want the seal to become inverted when you're slipping it on that way. So as long as we're careful and we keep an eye on that seal, this will be just fine. You can spin the seal a little bit like this to make sure that it hasn't become inverted. It actually tried to, and I slipped it over that ridge there. Anyway, there's no gaskets underneath these like there are on the big ones. So I'm just going to press it in. And this is a 3/4 inch impact socket that should work well to get it in there uniformly. And I don't know if you can tell, but I really cleaned up these shafts to get all the rust and corrosion off of them before we put the seal on. You want to tap these all the way down until they bottom out. Same thing with these. There's a ridge in there that these sit against, and these just go all the way in and sit against the back of the housing there. So keep tapping until you feel it bottom out and you hear a noise change on your hammer. All right, these are all done and they look really good. Let's do that big one on the back now. So here we are on the other side. This is the side that faces towards the rear of the truck. And I just wanted to show you that lip in there where the seal sits. You have to tap the seal all the way in there until it sits uniformly against that inner ring. Before we get the seal in there, I want to show you the speedometer gear. There we go. So you want to take a look at these teeth and make sure they're all uniform all the way across. And if they are different or noticeably worn, then replace this piece. But this one looks good on ours. So just stick it in there and push it all the way in. Then we put our paper gasket back in. So now I can tell just by looking at this that this is the side that faces out and this is the side that faces towards the oil. And if we pull back this rubber lip on the inside, you can see that spring. That confirms this is the side that faces the oil. Now I want to get the drive shaft yokes installed on the transfer case. The one on the left here is the front, the one on the right is the rear. And you want to make sure that these guys are clean. You can see I've already cleaned the one on the left. That's where those big seals ride, right around there. And if this part isn't clean, it's got some like crusty corrosion or rust on it, it's going to rip up the seal and it's going to leak. So we're going through all this work. We want to take an extra, 15 minutes to make sure that these guys are clean also. All right, we're going to put the yoke on the front of the transfer case. I've already got the new felt donut installed right there. And I'm going to take just a little bit of grease and just apply it around the outer side of this. I'm also going to put some silicone down each one of these grooves. That's just a little bit of added insurance to prevent any oil that tries to escape through those little grooves. Now I'm wiping off the excess, and hopefully it will leave some silicone in the deep spots there. Now we're going to take the yoke itself and just fit it onto the spline. Push it on there. And there's this thick washer and the nut. Just going to run this down. Now, as far as the torque spec goes, I couldn't find anything that was 100% definitive, so I'm going with a couple of different sources that I found on the internet that seemed to be credible, and they both said 175 foot-pounds. So that's what I'm going to do, 175 foot-pounds. So the way I like to do it is hit the torque setting that you want and then see where the castle nut lines up in relation with the cotter pin hole. And if it's not in perfect alignment, then I just tighten it a little bit more until it is in perfect alignment. And it looks like I need to go just a skosh more on the nut here. There we go. This is a brand new stainless steel cotter pin, good quality. All right, this side is done. Let's do the other yoke. All right, we're just going to do the same thing on this side. Just put a thin layer of grease on there so it won't be completely dry when it starts spinning against that new seal in there. And oh yeah, let's put a little silicone in between the grooves. I think this is actually a good idea to do this. There is no cotter pin hole on this side. It's got a different kind of a nut on it, but other than that, it's the same operation here. Well, it's not quite all the way on there yet, but it's good enough to get this nut started. There's the big washer. See, the nut's a little different on this side. All right, let's run this nut down and get this thing all the way seated to start with. Except for just a little bit of cleanup on the inside of the body here, this is ready to go into the truck. These are the 5 bolts that we're using to mount it. I got 2 brand new ones and 3 old ones that I cleaned up. And remember that a couple of these holes, I'll show you when we get it installed, but a couple of these holes are through holes. They go all the way to the inside of the transmission. So you want to use some type of thread sealant on the threads of those particular bolts. And this is my thread sealant of choice. I've had 100% success with this, and I've used it a lot, so I'm going to keep using it. Other than that, everything seems ready to go. All right, back underneath the truck, and I've got the final preparation done as far as the surface on the transmission, and we're ready to put the transfer case back in for good. I'm going to use Permatex number 2 on this gasket. Well, that's good. I was wondering about that. The gasket actually kind of sits in place, you know, partially because of this pin, but also partially because it's cut around the bearing. So that solves one problem. So I'm not going to be able to film the actual installation of the transfer case because the camera would just be in the way and I wouldn't be able to capture anything worthwhile. All right, I'm back with you, and I've got the transfer case installed, hopefully for the last time on this project. Last time when I installed it to mock it up, it took about 2 hours. This time it took about 20 minutes. So it's one of those things you get a little bit better every time you do it, I suppose. But this is really a miserable job. It's just, you know, everything about it is difficult. Now, if I had the body removed from the truck, I think this job would be fairly routine, except for the weight of the thing. It would be pretty easy, I think, because you could have complete access to it from the top and you could, you know, lift it with a strap or something like that. But underneath here, this is a pretty difficult job to get done underneath here. I've got the big gear slid onto the output shaft of the transmission, and I put the nut on there. It's just finger tight. I haven't torqued it down yet. The torque values that I found for this nut are between 80 and 110 foot-pounds, which I think is a little bit strange to have such a big margin for a torque spec. I'm going to torque it to 100 pounds when I do it. And if you remember from one of the previous videos, when we initially removed this from the truck, that nut was finger tight. The transfer case went in just like it did when we mocked it up. All 5 of the mounting bolts were in perfect alignment, and I think I got a perfect union between the 2 housings. You can see the Permatex along the edge there. I don't think I mentioned it, but I also put a new gasket on this pan as well. I did that already many months ago when I was initially trying to figure out this leak. But I figured since we had it on the bench, it was easy to pop it off and make sure everything was really clean and we got a nice seal with the new gasket. So I went ahead and did that. The torque specs that I found for the 5 mounting bolts, I believe, were 30 to 35 foot-pounds. So I torqued them all to 35, and then I got a wild hair and I torqued them all to 40. Sometimes when you have torque specs that are that low, that are only like 30, 35 pounds, some people say, it's no big deal. I'm not going to use a torque wrench. I'll just do it by feel. Well, on something like this, because our whole purpose for doing all this work was trying to stop a leak, the last thing you want to end up doing is putting different torques on all these different nuts. You know, we want as perfect of a mating as we can get with this gasket. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure all these bolts are torqued to the same spec. Because if you just run them in with a drill, or if you're just using a regular socket wrench or something like that, you're going to end up with one at 25 and one at 50 and one at 30 and one at, you know, whatever. And that's really no good. We want just as even of a union as we can get. We want the same pressure on all 5 bolts. All right, we're going to get this nut torqued down now and get the plate on. And there was a shim underneath the nut. It was 5 thousandths thick. And that shim was a little bit boogered up and folded over, so I made my own new one out of some 5 thousandths shim stock. And we're just going to put that in there like the old one was before. Make sure it's centered on there, of course. Now let me get the torque wrench out. We'll torque this to 100 pounds. And I've still got the transmission locked, so this should work just fine. Don't have very good leverage under here, but should be good enough. There we go. I have to go a little bit more to get the cotter pin hole to line up. All right, cotter pin is in. Now we're going to get some Permatex on the surface and on this new gasket. Put that plate on. And just keep in mind that all of these bolt holes are through holes into the transfer case. There's oil splashing around in there, so even though we're sealing the gasket and the mating surfaces here, I'm also going to put thread sealant on the bolts because we don't want any oil escaping that way. See if this thing will just stick here for me while I get the plate. Yeah, I think it will. That way we can put a little bit more on the outside. I got the plate all cleaned up, and I think what we're going to do is just put a bolt in here with no sealant on it. Actually, I'll put 2 bolts in here to start, just to get the thing hung, and then we can work on the sealant without having the thing trying to slip off on us. All right, we got sealant on that one. We'll get it started. Sealant on that one. Sealant on that one. I'm just going to run these down. Wipe off the excess. I'm going to torque these all to 25 just to make sure they're even and snug. All right, now it's time to put the shift levers back in for the transfer case. And this is our new pin. It's got a grease fitting on the end and those 2 holes in the middle. That's where the grease comes out. So it goes in this way towards the transmission. I'll get this assembled and then I'll bring it right back and show you what it looks like. Okay, the shift levers are installed. The pin, it ends up more or less flush with this other side over here. And there's a set screw right there that fits into the little gap in that pin. I've also got the anti-rattle clips installed. And they do provide some stability for the shift lever, so that's good. And down there, I don't know if you can see it, but I have the grease fitting in such an orientation that we can get to it from under the truck, because now I'm about ready to put this plate on and wrap this part up. But before I do that, I actually want to put some grease in here. So I'm going to crawl under the truck and we're going to watch up here from the top, and hopefully we'll see grease squishing out from in between the levers. Well, the grease fitting works as it should, so that's good. We got a lot of fresh grease in there in between the shifters. I reinstalled that plate and I put a piece of rubber between it and the floor of the truck. And now it's time to install the shift tower. We can put the transmission back into neutral. All right, I've got the new gasket on there with sealant, and I've cleaned up the top and the bottom of this thing, so we're ready to slide it on. Now here I just have to make sure that the 2 shift forks on the bottom of the shift tower line up with the receiver collars on the transmission shaft down there. And that was not difficult. I was able to kind of, peek in there as I was lowering it down, and got them to line up pretty much on the first try. So now I've got the shift tower mounted. Brand new gasket, both surfaces cleaned. Fresh sealant. I even used gas oil on the threads on the mounting bolts all the way around. Now I've got the shift levers, all the tin, and new boots, everything fastened back to the floor. But unfortunately, these boots were just a complete disaster. This one here ripped out right there, and right there. It was almost like it didn't fit properly, and the rubber was super thin. This one ripped also, and it fit even worse than this one did. So in order to just get it on there temporarily, I cut the rest of it off the top, and it's all jagged and everything. It's just a complete disaster. So I don't know if I ordered the wrong boots or if I got boots that were, you know, just really poor quality and didn't fit very well. So whichever case that may be, that was my fault. So I'm gonna have to order some new boots with my own money and get that fixed up right. In the meantime, that's how it is. I guess I shouldn't complain too much about those crappy boots, because there was about 100 things that could have gone wrong on this grader transfer case project. You know, it was kind of a stressful operation. There's a lot of things that could have gone wrong. So if this is the worst that happens, I'm okay with that. We can work with that and move on. So now I'm going to get both drive shafts reinstalled. I'm going to do that off camera so you won't have to wait around for that. Then we're going to put oil in the transmission and the transfer case, and then hold our breath and see if we get any leaks or not. All right, another day has passed. I've come out this morning and installed the drive shafts. I just wanted to show you the front and the rear because they're a little different. The front's a little bit smaller, as you can imagine, and it's got a different way of securing it to the yoke. You can see these little brackets. There's one bracket per side. There's 2 tabs around the head of each bolt. Once you get the bolts down snug, then you bend the tabs up around the head, and that just prevents the bolts from turning back out. It's pretty much all there is to it. That's the grease fitting right there, and I'm going to run some grease in it right now and see where it comes out. So let's try this. I don't know if you can see it, but it's coming out on the inside there. So you can tell the rear is quite a bit beefier. There are no brackets on this rear like there are on the front. It's just got these horseshoe fasteners, and there's one on this side and one on the other side, and they're fastened with lock washers and nuts on the back side. I see a grease fitting right there and a grease fitting right there. So let's hit both of those and see what happens. Yep, if you can see it went into the deal there and it came out the ends of where the bearings are. That's good. Let's pump some into this one. One more thing yet to do, that's to reinstall the speedometer cable. Goes right there. I think that's it, guys. Only thing left to do is put oil in it. Well, the time has finally come to put oil in these things. Last Christmas, I got an oil transfer pump from Santa. So this is the first time trying to use it. I'll show you the pump when we're done here. I guess I'll just turn it on and see what happens. Well, it's a little slow, but I guess that's all right. It's coming. Here it comes. I always just fill these things so they're right to the bottom of the fill hole. And if you overfill it a little bit, it'll just come running back out, and just let it do that and then put the plug back in. And you can stick your finger in there or stick a piece of wire in there and check it, but it should be right about there at the bottom of the plug hole on both sides. All right, let me show you this pump I got. It's called the Harpy Eagle. It almost looks like Happy Eagle, but it's Harpy Eagle. It's got these little plugs on the end. They have little teeth on them, so you kind of snap them on and they'll stay there on both ends, which is nice because when you're done with the project, just like I'm going to do, I'm just going to leave the oil in it until next time. And you can always pump it out if you're using a different type of oil. It's just got one on-off switch there, and for the power source you just need a 12-volt battery. I have to say that was pretty slick. That's way better than using those plastic pumps that you screw onto the top of your oil container. It works really well, it just runs a little bit slow. So between the transfer case and the transmission, I was under the truck for quite a while. The other thing I noticed is that the motor got pretty hot. So I periodically shut it down and let it rest for a few minutes and then started it back up. I don't know if that's because, you know, we're pumping gear oil with it. Maybe it wouldn't do that with lighter weight engine oil. But I don't know if I can recommend this yet just because of the heat of the motor. I'll have to use it again and see how it does. All right, that job is complete. This is the part where I hold my breath and hopefully nothing leaks. Let's take a look at the transfer case first of all. Dry on this side of the bottom of the pan. Dry on that side of the bottom of the pan. Dry on the drain nut. So far so good. Let's take a look at the transmission. Right in here was the primary leak because the plate that was overlapping between the housings is not too far right in there. So this is the part that was cocked this way a little bit. And my sealant is dry. That sat for at least 3 days, I think it was, in between. And the other leak was coming from up there by that bolt that was missing. We won't know about the seals until we start driving it, and it's still going to be a little bit before we get the engine back. But I think it's safe to make the assumption that those seals are going to do their job. We took a lot of care trying to get them in properly. After about 15 minutes, she's dry as a bone. Again, the real test won't be until we start driving the truck, get things hot and get things moving around. But the fact of the matter is that this was leaking quite heavily just sitting around. So I think if we don't have any leaks after a couple of hours, I think we're in good shape. All right, I've got the white rags underneath the truck, and so far so good, not a single drop. Well, I guess I'm gonna call it 2 days and absolutely not one single drop. Now let's make sure we can still select all the gears. Okay, this is neutral on the transmission. Reverse, first, second, third, back to neutral. So the taller lever here is in the forwardmost position. That means the front wheel drive is disengaged, so we're only in two-wheel drive. Select four-wheel drive by pulling it back. And then if you want four low, you push this handle forward like that. Four high, pull it back. Back to the neutral position and back in two-wheel drive. Well, I think we got it. Man, what a relief it is to have that done. I've been thinking about that for a few months, and it's really nice to have it behind me. If I rated all the jobs I've done to this truck up until this point, as far as importance goes, I would rate this job second only to the engine repair. Because even if we had the engine back and freshly rebuilt, we couldn't hardly drive the truck around the way it was. It was just leaking too much, and we would have burned up the transmission. But this job is only 99% done right now. There's one more tiny little thing we have to do.